Okay, hi everyone. I'm Peter Ng, and welcome back to Catching Up, the podcast where conversations don't end when the bells ring. Today, I'm reconnecting with Isabella Romero, who's now a dermatology medical assistant and a UCF pre-med student. I'm very excited to get to talk to you and catch up a little bit more. From what I see on your guest form, we were graduated from high school in 2023. So you took my class, I want to say, was it sophomore or junior year?
It was junior year.
Junior year. Okay. So
Mhm.
2022, we're talking a couple years straight out of COVID. We're still kind of adjusting back in the classroom and everything. So how
Yes.
have you been? How's life been going for you?
It's been good. Definitely a lot of changes since 2022. Um,
Hmm.
I'm in a very good place right now, I would say. Um, yeah, everything's been really good, especially with school and everything. I
Wow.
feel like
That's awesome.
everything from back then definitely like set me up for the success that I've achieved now.
Good, good. And for the audience and the people listening, how do we know each other?
So he was my anatomy and physiology professor at my high school. I
Hmm.
took his class when I was a junior, and it was one of my favorite classes ever. He was one of my
I
favorite
appreciate
teachers
it.
I've
Thank
ever
you.
had.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yes.
Do you feel like the stuff? So my ultimate goal, obviously I have a lot of kids who aren't necessarily going in the med route or nursing route or health route, but my ultimate goal for those that are pursuing this stuff at a collegiate and beyond is that my class kind of acts as a foundation, um,
Mm,
to hopefully get you a little bit of a leg up when you do take those college versions of classes. Have you taken
yeah.
anatomy or physio at UCF already?
I have, and I will say it was like a breeze. I mean,
Oh,
like
okay.
it was, yeah, I was actually telling my friend the other day how you were like one of the only teachers that I've ever had in high school where like the class and the curriculum was like a college course where you kind of just went in, you could just sit wherever, just listen to the lecture. You can take notes if you wanted to. If not, like it's fine. There was not
Mhm.
really any assignments. Just be prepared when the exam comes. And
Yeah,
I feel like getting in the habit of that just really helped for college.
good. That's awesome. Obviously, I still have like certain assignments and things like that, and a lot of that ends up being more ways to balance out grades in case test scores don't look as great
Exactly,
as
yeah.
like. But yeah, I do try to schedule or coordinate my course and my class in such a way that it does reflect a little bit of what you see in college. And a lot of
Yeah,
college classes that you might have noticed are kind of conversational.
yeah,
I treat what I teach as not just instructional, but storytelling. I
yeah,
want to say, hey, here's why this works, and here's why it's interesting, and here's why we should learn about it. So, yeah, I think when you can achieve that, you can connect better with people, not just high school students, and they can engage more, and
mhm,
truly feel like they want to learn something. So
yeah,
that's awesome that my class has been able to do that for you. What level are you at
yeah.
right now at UCF?
I am a junior. I just started my junior year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're almost there.
I'm almost there.
Okay,
So we'll
okay.
see.
I
But
will want
yeah,
to
it's
learn
been
more
very
about
helpful.
like your future plans and stuff. We're gonna get that to into that a little bit later. But while we're here, let's talk a little bit about one of our first signature segments. And one of the things I love to ask all my guests is, what's something that you learned today?
What I learned today.
Or recently? It doesn't have to be literally today, because it
Let's
is only 1 o'clock or so.
recently. Yes. I'll kind of I'll talk about a conversation I was having with my friend yesterday. We were kind of talking about how, like, we feel like the classes that we're taking, when we're able to make connections with things that we're learning outside of that class, the class is just so much easier. Like, it could be an easy class, or sorry, like a difficult class. And if we can just use what we're learning in that class and just connect it to other things that we've learned that kind of follow
Mm.
that same system, it makes everything like so much easier for us. So I think that that's something that I've been trying to implement ever since like I've noticed that, and it's helped a
Is there
lot
any recent
actually.
example with like a specific class that that's caught your eye?
Um yeah, I would say like for example, I do it a lot with my job, I would say, because I do learn a lot
Hmm.
in my job every day. So when I'm in class, I like to make connections from like what I'm learning with what I
Okay.
do at work. So let's say I'm having like a patient come in and they're on a specific medication and I don't recognize the medication, but maybe then a week later in class, I'm like learning
Mm.
about that medication in one of my classes and how it affects, this system. And it kind of just helps because when you're able to make that connection, you kind of have like an
Yeah.
aha moment and then you just never forget it,
Yeah,
you
that
know?
makes sense.
Whereas if you're like trying to just memorize everything, it's just harder for
Got
you.
you. So it becomes a little more concrete in the memory banks and more applicable,
Exactly.
which is important. What I
Exactly.
learned today, I tried to find like, hey, what's something interesting that happened today on March 29th? I found out that today is the
Mhm.
anniversary of Coca-Cola being sold for the first time. And yeah, yeah, and I had
Really?
heard something similar to this. It started in Atlanta, and that's where the Coca-Cola factory is. I had heard something along the lines of this
Mhm.
growing up, but Coca-Cola was originally sold as a medical tonic, and it ended up being initiated or changed and formulated differently, and then eventually sold later down the line as a soda, as a fountain soda. But yeah, the original creation behind it was they were hoping it would be a tonic. I'd be curious what type of ailments it was meant to treat. But yeah,
Yeah.
kind of a unique little story there as far as creating such a worldly popular soda, and in its original form. The creators were like, "Oh, well, this will be a medicine," and not quite.
Yeah.
I think
Oh
there's a
my
lot of examples of
gosh,
stuff
that's
like
so
that where
interesting.
the original intention maybe wasn't what people wanted, and then you were able to kind of pivot it
Mhm.
elsewhere. I'm very curious about your profession and what you've been able to start working with while you're a student. How'd you find yourself as a dermatology medical assistant?
So, when I graduated high school, I was still 17. My birthday is in August, so I graduated in May. And I knew I wanted to do something medically related, but I didn't have a medical assistant like certification or anything like that. But dermatology is one of the specialties where you're actually able to work as a medical assistant without a
Oh.
certification in the state of Florida. So I had been going to my dermatologist
Hmm.
for years, and I went in and I was like, "Oh, are you guys like hiring or anything?" They're like, "Oh, we're not hiring here, unfortunately." But my office has multiple locations all over the country, actually, and it started here in Orlando. So we have a million
Hmm.
offices here. So I just applied to every single office in Orlando.
Okay, that's consistency,
I
commitment.
got an
Okay.
interview. Yes, I did. It took me like 3 months, but I finally got a job. I started in Winter Park and then I started transferring to other offices that were closer. And now I'm back actually in my original position, which is a float. So I travel to all the offices all over Orlando, wherever they need help. And
Wow.
I love my job. I really
That's
do.
a really cool
Yeah.
side job hustle, especially as a student, that is so directly connected to what you're
Yes.
pursuing in your degree and what you're actively looking for. You mentioned you're a pre-med student.
Yeah.
Do you want to look into becoming a
Hmm.
dermatologist?
I do. That is the end goal. I do want to
Hmm.
go to medical school and hopefully become a dermatologist. It's definitely a I won't say it's impossible, but it is
Of
very, very
course.
difficult to become a
Right.
dermatologist. It's like the hardest specialty to match in residency. So, but I don't know. I've met a lot of dermatology residents. At my job, we have a residency program, and they're all telling me like, it might seem like it's impossible, but if you just have the
Hmm.
mentorship and you really put in the work, I don't doubt that
Yeah,
you can
of
do it.
course. It's
So,
a lot of hard work, obviously. You got to get into med school in the first place anyway.
yeah,
But, I'd be curious how
exactly.
many other dermatology candidates had the opportunity that you have to already be working in the field and see firsthand how much of that
Yeah,
works. So
that's
that is a
true.
huge advantage you have. Obviously, a lot of it's going to be grades and MCATs and all the analytical stuff necessary.
Yes.
But that
Yeah.
goes such a long way for your future and what you're hoping to achieve. So that's awesome. I'm super glad
Hmm.
about that. Uh, while we're here, let's go ahead and move a little bit forward into our reflection opportunity and think back to high school. So it wasn't that long ago for you, but time has passed, and I'm sure you today are a different
Yeah.
person than you were in high school. So when you think back to your high school time, it could have been my class, it could have been any class. Is there a moment that stands out to you the most?
Um, yes.
Okay.
And I'm gonna be exposing myself
All
a
right.
little bit
You're
here,
welcome to
but
as much as you feel comfortable.
so my junior year, so this was when I was in
Hmm.
taking your class as well. I was also doing MI with Miss Stevens, and then I was also taking HBS with Miss Cecila. So I didn't take the biomed course before, so I didn't do like
Right.
biomed, HBS, MI, BI. I did HBS and MI, and I did it at the exact
Hmm.
same time with like no prior, like the only thing I had taken
Yeah.
was biology. So like I had no real like background or anything. And MI
Right.
is hard. Like it's like college level like microbiology stuff. Like so I switched into that class actually 2 weeks into the year. So I was already
Hmm.
behind 2 weeks, and we had already had two exams or like two quizzes. And so Miss Stevens told me like I can come in during lunch and um, that I could take like the quiz or whatever and make up for it. But I took the quiz like not even knowing what was going on in the class. I had never seen any of this. Like it was it was really stressful. So I took the both of the quizzes and I cheated on them.
Oh.
I cheated on the
Oh no.
quizzes and Miss Stevens caught me.
Oh.
And if you know Miss Stevens, she does not play.
Yeah.
And so she was really mad at me and I was freaking out and I don't know what was going on with her that day, but she was like, "I'm gonna let you keep the quiz grades that you
Really?
got, even with the cheating." Yeah.
Wow, that's very generous.
And I was like, "There's no way." Like, and she basically like was like, "Don't let it happen again." But ever since that point,
Hmm.
that was the beginning of my junior year, I was like, I'm going to put everything I have into this class and
Yeah.
all of my classes so that I'd never have to feel like I need to cheat on an exam or
Sure.
anything like that. Right. And she took a chance on me. And ever since that point, I got an A on every single one of her exams where she was like, I don't even know how you're doing this, but I was in tutoring every single
Yeah.
day after
Yeah.
school. Like I was in her class. I was like, teach me this. I don't understand it. Like yeah,
You
it
know,
really,
maybe she might have, it was obviously an early time when she was getting to know you at that moment. It's
yeah.
possible she might have even seen something in you that it's like, hey, this is worth, like you said, taking a chance on. I know what type of student
Hmm.
you are. I understand that you're a hardworking student and you care a lot about your academics. But cheating
Mhm.
is such an interesting thing that happens in school. As a
Mhm.
teacher, I know that kids are going to do stuff like this a lot. And I think it very much depends on the case by case scenario. If
Mhm.
it's a homework, if it's a paper handout, if it's something that very much so is meant to be a grade pattern for our grade book, I don't really am going to get as mad and upset about that because I was in high school too. These are
Yeah.
things that, are mostly mundane.
Mhm.
When it comes down to testing, when it comes down to projects, when it comes down to real moments of showing how much or how little you know,
Mhm.
that obviously starts to feel more of a betrayal of trust. But
Yeah.
in your circumstance, I've had many students who have either admitted to me after the fact or I've caught them in the moment. And
Mhm.
it wasn't because they felt like, I don't know any of this. And, oh, well, who cares? I'm just going to roll the dice. It was, in fact, a circumstance that these were kids that were such high performers and they had such high expectations of themselves that their backs were against the
Mhm.
wall. And I have to assume it
Mm.
was something similar to you where you just felt like, I've got no other option. And I
Yeah.
get it. When you feel that desperation start to kick in, you are more willing to take riskier and riskier decisions to say, I just need to find a way through this. This will be the only time, whatever. Right. But I
Yeah.
think in a moment where, even if getting caught, there's a difference from the adult perspective that you can read why something like this happened versus someone that never pays attention, is never in class, is disrespectful, all these other things that unfortunately you don't want to see. And then you're like, all right,
Mhm.
now on top of all of that, you're trying to get away with a fast one.
Yeah.
So, like you said, and I'm glad that Miss Stevens had that. I mean, the fact that she let you keep those grades is crazy to me, but
I
um,
know.
I'm glad that she was able to see that you were worth investing in and not just saying, all
Yeah.
right, you know what, you're out of the program. Because, with biomed, it is a
Yeah.
bit different than my class. I can't just kick you out if something like that were to
Exactly. Yeah.
happen. So I'm glad that she was able to see that. And more important than that, I'm glad you were able to reflect and say, yeah, that was a moment of desperation, but I don't want to put myself in that position again. And
Yeah.
it's growth. It's truly a growth
Yeah.
opportunity. So
Yeah,
I'm
for
glad that
sure.
you had that experience. Ultimately, it sounds like outside of that moment, it sounds like you had a very, let's say, in control and confident high school experience. Was there anything about high
Yeah.
school that you felt relatively unsure about or uncomfortable with?
Mm,
And it doesn't have to be just academics. It doesn't have to be just like grades.
let's see. Something I felt uncomfortable with.
Because everyone's experiences in high school is ultimately, yes, about academics, but it's also a social experience. It's also the opportunity to
Mhm.
make friends or potentially have boyfriends or girlfriends, and
Yeah.
the management of time and realizing that you have all these classes and being up at 7 o'clock in the morning and all the things that come with teenager and going through post pubescence. So I don't know if any of those things felt like you're kind of figuring it out, still trying to learn, or if it felt kind of, I don't know, easier for you.
I will say, so like I did dance in high school, so I was on the
Mm-hmm.
dance team. And my freshman year, I was not taking school seriously.
Mm-hmm.
My sophomore year, I have bad ADD. So, and I've been diagnosed with ADD since I was in second grade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I've always really struggled in school growing up. And when COVID came around, my mom kind of took that as an opportunity and was like, okay, you're going to go in person and it'll be perfect because you'll be like one of two students in your
Yeah.
classroom. You'll be
Right.
able to focus. So that really helped me a lot. And I was able to create those like academic habits that I used throughout, well, that I still use today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when creating those academic habits, I feel like I got a little bit too extreme in a way where it almost became a part of my identity because it was
Mm,
like I have struggled in school. Like, I feel like, I was always the last one to turn in an exam. Like, it was always, everyone always thought I was like stupid and stuff like that. So once I finally got a hang of it, it was like, I don't want to let this go. Like, this is a part of my identity?
mm,
And so when doing dance in high school, it was hard to balance those two things. And I was captain my junior year, which junior year of high school was when I was like really like locked academically.
yeah.
And I received a lot of backlash from my dance team. Like, there was like, I remember one week where I was really going through it because I had a death in the family. So I didn't go to school for a week and I had to go to Miami for the funeral and
Hmm.
everything. And apparently we had like a performance, I think, on like that Friday, which obviously I wasn't going to be able to attend. But I remember they all sent me like a giant paragraph telling me, like, because I hadn't been in school, like, they think it's best that I don't perform with them and all this stuff. And the dance teacher always, like, also said the same thing, which was
Did they know
like,
you were experiencing a loss in the family?
they didn't know that I was experiencing a loss, but after that, I had told them. And then once they found out, it was kind of like they were like isolating me kind of from like the team. It was kind of just like awkward and
Yeah.
everything. So after that, my senior year, I didn't want to do dance anymore, but it was a lot emotionally for me. I got through it, and that's all that matters?
Sure. I mean, I understand the difficulty of, especially in a leadership role, the
Mm-hmm.
teammates are looking up to you and expecting you to lead and be that person to rely on. But it's a little unfair, and I'm not going to speak to your teacher or anything, but it's a little unfair to maybe not try to find out why you're not being at practice. You're not preparing for
Yeah,
a performance. Because if you were someone to rely on prior, it seems like something big must have happened. Something like,
exactly.
the
For me not to
basic
be in school
expectation.
for it.
Yeah, yeah. And the
Yeah.
basic expectation, I think, with friends or teammates or coworkers or people you are close with and spend a lot of time with is checking in. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily like if you weren't ready to talk about it, you don't have to share every detail, but you can just simply say, I'm going through some stuff with my family right now. If I can get some time, I would really appreciate that. And I'll try to get back to this when I can. And
Yeah.
I think that's a human reaction. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, it turned out the way it did. Have you been able to still practice dancing, at UCF?
No, I have not.
Not
I
even like in
kind
a
of
like club
have a
setting or
bit
like
of
for fun?
PTSD from it. I I don't even want. I mean, I still have my flexibility and
Okay,
everything.
that's good.
I work out, I go to the gym,
Yeah.
so I get my exercise in. But no, I haven't.
Dancing is so much fun. I've been looking to try to do
It
some
is.
dance lessons this year, and
You should.
I'm looking forward to it. It's I don't consider myself to be the most rhythmic person. I thankfully think I have a base level of rhythm, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also an incredible exercise.
It is.
You underestimate how many muscles are required, and I mean, you see like Dancing with the Stars and like how exhausted they are after everything. But yeah, it is a
Yes.
very physical feat, and not just the physical side, but the creative side of making sure you're moving in rhythm and making sure you're, especially with other people. Um,
Exactly.
so there's so much to it. I growing up being Latino, I've had my opportunities to dance like merengue and salsa and bachata, and that's really
Yeah.
fun. And you get to connect with the culture. But there's
Mm-hmm.
other styles of dance too that might be
Yeah.
more your forte and stuff. So who knows? If the bug
Hey.
catches you again. Okay.
That's it.
So let's go ahead and move on to our next major segment. And this is one of my favorite questions I get to ask people when I have them on the show.
Mhm.
If you had the chance to sit with your past self, 16, 17 year old version of Isabella, what would you tell your past self?
I would tell my past self to really focus on being authentically yourself.
Mm,
Because it goes a long way when you're able to stick to that authentic part of yourself as you get older, because I think a lot of people right now, and I've gone through it myself, don't know who they are really. And
yeah,
it's because they've grown up in an environment where people were telling them who they are, what they should be, and just following that. And
right.
then they get older and they're just lost because they were never able to be authentically themselves, you know?
Hmm.
And I think it goes a long way as well, because sometimes when you are attaching yourself to these, materialistic or just like things that aren't truly you, and you're attaching value to that,
Hmm.
if one of those things is taken from you, you completely fall apart because you're putting your identity in these things when that's not really you, you
Right.
know? They're just an addition of yourself, but that's not your true identity, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
So,
That
yeah.
process you're explaining and talking about, I think it's a lifelong process. My
Mm,
version of who I am now at 34 is quite different than me even when I was 24, and certainly very
yeah.
different than me when I was 14. And
Mhm.
I still think there's a root part of me and my core and my morals or my ethics that I don't think has drastically changed. I don't think you're
Mhm.
expecting total differences, but like you said, discovering who you want to be and what
Exactly,
makes you
yeah.
who you are, and not just because you see someone online that you're trying to mimic, or you see certain
Mhm.
items that make you feel a certain way. Like you said, like, a lot of that is an addition. It's not
Mhm.
bad to have certain things, but it's
Yeah.
not the definition of you. And
Yeah.
what's helped me so much, honestly, is just being more willing to try things. As I've grown
Yes.
older, I've been more willing to try new things and say, why not? If it's not for me,
Yeah.
it's not for me, and it's fine. But when I step
Yeah.
out of my comfort zone and I push myself in those
Exactly.
positions, I sometimes find something that I learn to love. And I learn to say, wow, that's actually a huge part of like something that I never thought of before. And now I really want to
Mhm.
continue being a part of me. So that's been
Exactly.
a really wonderful experience. Do you feel like if you shared all those things with your younger self, would they believe you?
Um, I think that she would think that she knows everything and that she's figured it out,
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
just that teenage ego. But no, when you just approach life and you learn to think in the mindset that you don't know anything, you just learn so much. It's crazy,
yeah.
because when people are just so attached to what they believe in, and you could give them a fact and they will just reject it,
Hmm.
because it doesn't align with what they've identified with. You know what I'm
Sure,
saying?
sure.
So I think making that switch was just very eye-opening to me,
Good. Yeah,
acknowledging that I don't know it all, that
right.
there's still so much to learn, you know?
And I asked that question primarily because, yeah, I think there's a wide variety of students and teenagers going through high school of where
Mhm.
they're at in their mindset. There are kids like you that certainly I believe they've got it all set up and
Mhm.
everything will play the exact way they expect it to, and here's my plan for the next 10 years, and it's all going to work out. And yeah, sure, there are some rare circumstances where that can happen, but I also think there's other students that genuinely have no clue what's going on, and they are waiting almost for someone to tell them, here's what to do next. And sometimes that's a necessity, almost, if you want to think of it that way, to figure out that not always will you get the answer, or not always will someone tell you what to do. The necessity of self discovery is what makes you grow and what makes you mature and what makes you realize this is actually what's best for me. Because, sure, someone with more quote unquote wisdom or authority may tell you, I think this is your best bet, but they may not be 100% correct. So it's certainly the part of growth overall. What about this? What's something that you can think back to during high school that you're proud of now that back then you didn't really see?
Let's see. I would say my work ethic for sure, because now, especially like I'm working and I have a life outside of school, I have to put in that
Right.
extra effort in order to kind of, study for my exams and keep track with school. But back then, it was, I don't know what it was, but it was almost like I could just go to class and just listen and it would just retain in my brain. Like I wouldn't really need to like take notes or anything and stuff like that. Um, and I think that that was a really cool skill to have. I can't say that it's always like that for me now. I feel like I need to put in extra work to kind of like reach that state of mind. But yeah, I would say that that was something I feel like I should have taken more advantage of back then.
So now that we're towards the tail end of the episode, I always like to finish up thinking ahead and what's coming down in our future and what's coming down the pike. Um, so, what's something that you still think you're working on or trying to become?
I think that's something I'm still trying to work on. Um, that I've noticed actually plays a huge part in everything is developing
Mm,
healthy coping mechanisms. Because when you are a full time student and you're working 30 hours a week in a job that is extremely mentally high demand, these are like
sure.
people's lives that we're dealing with. It's my responsibility to send the right prescription, all that stuff. So I think that when you are not in the habit of practicing healthy coping mechanisms, you will burn out. And it's
Yeah.
happened to me a million times. And I've just hit rock bottom where I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Over the summer, I
Hmm.
had to medically withdraw from school for the semester because I was so burnt out and
Yeah.
mentally just not doing well. And I think it all came down to the fact where I just didn't have
Sure.
healthy coping mechanisms. And I think that if you do have healthy coping mechanisms, you can just go so much farther in life. You can just handle a lot more.
Yeah, I fully agree. These are things that aren't taught necessarily. Like, there's no class for therapy, or
Yeah.
there's no class for how to handle stress and anxiety. But it's unfortunate that oftentimes you are just dealt with, okay, well, now this is really happening and I got to just
Mhm.
figure it out. And sometimes you
Exactly.
have the resources, or sometimes you have the support group to help you in those circumstances. But so often
Mhm.
it can feel like it's brand new. I
Yeah.
personally did not have, growing up, I had friends who had anxiety. I had friends who had other um, neurodivergent conditions. And I could empathize with them, but I never felt what that felt like. And then
Mhm.
I vividly remember, I turned 30 years old 4 years ago, and I started feeling anxiety for the first time. And I had to
Mm.
learn how to cope with that and handle that. and learn the triggers for something like this too. The thing that
Yeah.
I've figured out in my 4 something years going through therapy, learning more about myself, and trying to understand why I feel the way I feel is, um, at least in my experience, it's a lack of control. And if I feel like I'm
Mm,
not in control of my circumstances, then that starts to manifest through the feelings of anxiety. And it
yeah.
sounds like you've had a similar experience regarding school and trying to balance your job and life. And like you said, if you don't have that moment, and that moment doesn't have to be, I think that's a common thing that people believe, that moment doesn't have to be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
Finding what works for you, it can be meditation, it can be therapy, it can be all sorts of things, prayer, it can be whatever works for you that allows
Yeah.
you to de-stress, allows you to reflect, and allows you to reset the mind and say it's okay. And also
Yeah.
recognize that there are bad days too and good days too.
Yeah.
When you have those days that beat you up, it's fine to say, I'm not going to go hang out tonight with other people or do that extra thing I was going to do. I just need a night to let it all absorb. And then
Yes,
tomorrow it'll
exactly.
be a new day. That's been
Mm-hmm.
such a thing for me where I'm such a people pleaser. I try to do my best to be joyful with everyone and make sure everyone's having a good time. But I've recognized that if I'm not in a good place, it's a disservice to me and my friends, truly, for me to be around them and just say,
Yeah.
I just need some time alone.
Agree.
I'll just be by
Yeah.
myself. I love you guys. I'll see you when I can. And
Yeah.
those are the parts of growing up, those are the parts of learning that are vital, because all of us are susceptible to that burnout that you talked about, and that feeling
Exactly.
of despair, almost, of saying like, man, how can I handle this? So I have one
Mm-hmm.
last question for you. When we were in school, and you are still a student, so there's a lot that is still the same, but you've grown quite some time since then. But when we were in high school, especially, growth was such a binary process. You were
Mm-hmm.
determined, or your growth was often analyzed by grades, like how many A's were you getting, or attendance. Are you tardy to class? Things of that nature. How do you feel like you determine or decide what growth is today?
I think that the way that I determine what growth is for me today, how many times can I contradict myself from what I thought was true, let's say 6 months ago?
Yeah, recognizing that
Yeah,
you're not always right, recognizing that
exactly.
mistakes happen, and
Yeah.
admitting those mistakes, which is a huge part of adulthood. And unfortunately, a lot of
Hmm.
people never want to admit mistakes, and that's not very healthy. So,
Yeah,
Isabella, I want to really thank you for being here with me today. Do you have any final words that you
of
want to share with
course.
the audience?
Mr. NG is the best anatomy and physiology high school professor.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. If any of my current students are listening to this, maybe they'll be like, "Oh, maybe I should study for this test."
You should. You really should.
Okay, I
It'll help
appreciate
you a
it.
lot.
Thank you, thank you.
But yeah,
So
no, it was a pleasure.
good, awesome, awesome. So I want to thank you guys that are at home listening for listening to Catching Up, where the conversations continue beyond the classroom. I'll see you next time.